Good afternoon or evening, depending on where you're joining us from. I am Bo Schuff. I'm the Executive Director of DC Vote, and I want to thank you all for joining the Fighting for Equality Town Hall. A big welcome to those of you who are joining us from across the country and to any of you who are new to this campaign. A special welcome to our many long-term activists who have led the way and who we've worked with shoulder to shoulder in our quest to end taxation without representation for the people of DC. The 700,000 of us who call DC home live under a unique form of voter suppression. We have no senators and no voting member in the House of Representatives. Furthermore, Congress can nullify any legislation that our locally elected government passes. They can do this because we are not a state. The best way to bring full equality for the people of DC, quite simply, is DC statehood. This town hall is designed to bring you all up to date about the present state, or not a state, of affairs for our campaign. We will cover the status of H.R. 51, the Washington, D.C. Admissions Act, which was on the brink of making history. Never before has either chamber of Congress passed a D.C. statehood bill. And we'll talk about the outrageous act Congress recently took when they cheated D.C. out of $750 million in critical COVID-19 aid. I want to thank People for the American Way, Stand Up for Democracy, Declaration for American Democracy, Stand Up America, Declaration for American Democracy, the League of Women Voters, the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, and the team over at We Act Radio and Act TV who helped us pull together this town hall. Thank you also to our coalition of over 150 national organizations supporting our work for statehood. The movement for statehood is stronger than any time in recent history. And some folks think that may be why we got cheated out of our share of the COVID-19 relief in the CARES Act. I'm not sure. There's certainly no rational reason for Congress' deliberate action during a pandemic in the district where they work, where many of their staff live, that is now a hotspot for the virus, to come up with a scheme that gives DC less money than states with smaller populations. Not only unfair, dangerous. The people of DC pay all the taxes that everyone else does. We pay our fair share, and we deserve our fair share of aid. So let's get started. Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland will be joining us shortly. But first, I want to introduce Dr. Alice Green, who is a pastor here in DC and also an author. Last year, Dr. Green delivered a statehood summit sermon, that's hard to say, at Covenant Baptist UUC. She lifted up DC's lack of representation in statehood as a moral issue. And she moved the congregation and those of us visiting that day, and we asked her to open our program tonight. Thank you, Dr. Green, so much for joining us.
Thank you, Bo, for asking me to speak. When you give a pastor an opportunity to speak, we usually take it.
Appreciate that.
Yes. So, 12 score and 4 years ago, our fathers and mothers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all people are created equal. This nation has repeatedly stood for liberty and justice. In the Revolutionary War, in our own Civil War, in the World Wars, and others. We can never forget what the brave men and women who gave their lives in these wars died for, that this nation, under God, shall have a life kept in freedom, and that this government, which was created to be a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, shall not perish from the earth. Well, I chose to begin with this revised version of Abraham Lincoln's famous words because my goal today is to help inspire you and hopefully to fire you up to action. So I thought, what better way to do that than to remind you of President Lincoln's eloquent speech about how wonderfully idealistic and precious is our democracy. Over the years since his speech, the United States has recognized that all citizens, including women and those freed from slavery, are equal citizens of this country who deserve the right to vote. Democracy is a beautiful thing, a governmental system that gives all the political power to the common people, like us, who rule through our elected officials. I'm one of the common people. I'm a citizen of this great country. But I don't have a representative who can vote in Congress. And there are over 700,000 others who live in Washington, D.C., just like me. And many of them, like me, moved here to work for our federal government. Our right to have a voting representative has been stripped from us, not because we're not equal with other Americans, not because we have committed felony crimes or done anything against our government, and not because we failed to pay our federal taxes. Citizens of DC have been disenfranchised simply because we live here. The seriousness of this for DC residents became strikingly clear when Congress made the decision to treat DC as an American territory when funding the states to help with the coronavirus pandemic. I want to repeat what Bo Shuff just said to you a minute ago. Washington, D.C. has the unique dilemma of being required to pay lots of taxes into the federal government while not having any right for our voice to count. What do we call it? Yeah, taxation without representation. This decision was particularly cruel, though. DC has a dense population, making the spread of COVID-19 more destructive than it is in many of the states that received a whole lot more money. Just yesterday, the New York Times reported that DC has the highest recent growth in cases among the nation's 10 largest metro areas. The House of Representatives delayed its return to Washington because the top position told them don't come back. And most tragically, the spread of the virus has been most devastating in our poorest neighborhoods. I hope you can understand why I'm upset. As a Christian pastor, I see this as a moral issue. I believe that the leaders in Congress who made this decision did it simply because they think it will be to their political advantage. By making this decision, they are putting the lives of citizens in jeopardy. It's not right, it's not just, it's cruel, and it is inconsistent with democratic ideals. Our disenfranchisement is just one example of a serious problem in our Congress, the grab for power. Power-hungry leaders will continue to find ways to chew off pieces of our democracy. They're already disenfranchising African Americans through a combination of racialized policing, mass incarceration, and stripping the right to vote from returning citizens who served their time and paid their dues. One day you may see that they have also perfected gerrymandering in order to put the people they want in office. And you may see that they've put justices in the Supreme Court who will agree with anything they want. Oh, wait, they've already done that, haven't they? If they're allowed to continue to eat away at our democracy, your children and your children's children could one day find themselves in a place where they've lost any right to meaningful representation. This is not a problem just for DC citizens. This injustice is a moral issue that every American who believes in our democracy must wrestle with. It's a moral issue that will require all of us who believe in justice and in our democracy to work together to change. We have to believe that we, the people, have the right to fix this. We, the people, have the power to fix this. So I'm pleading with you today on behalf of the citizens who live in DC, and I'm pleading with you on behalf of the United States of America. Don't allow this country's beautiful ideals to be swept away by power-hungry leaders. We need you to get involved, to speak up, to make things happen, to act now, so this nation, under God, shall continue to find new ways to deepen and share its freedom. So this government of the people will continue to be led by the people and for the people. So this beautiful democracy shall not perish from this earth. Thank you.
Doctor, thank you so much for being with us, and it's truly an honor to have you with us. I want to thank you again for joining us, and have a great rest of your weekend, or a great rest of your week, I should say, and we'll talk to you again.
Thank you.
You all heard it already, and you will throughout tonight's program. We need you to get involved no matter where you live. You'll see above that there is a website called showup4dc.com. That's the number 4, showup4dc.com/cheated, where you can take all kinds of different actions, no matter what you are comfortable doing, to get involved and help us out. Our next speaker is a true champion of democracy. We're going to start with just a short video of Senator from Maryland, Senator Chris Van Hollen, his statement about the mistreatment of DC in the COVID-19 aid package, and you'll see for yourself why we consider a champion. Let's show that video if we could. Thanks.
the people of the District of Columbia, send the federal treasury more tax dollars than the people of 22 other states. Let me say that again. The people of the District of Columbia send the IRS more tax revenues than the people of 22 other states. And yet, when it came time to write the formula for distributing emergency funds under the coronavirus, they weren't part of the kind of funding formulas they normally are. Now, I asked about this because I thought maybe this would be a simple fix. I mean, surely in a bill of $2 trillion in emergency relief, we can do right by the people of the District of Columbia and not shortchange them $700 million. And the answer I got back was no. No, this was not a mistake. This was not an oversight. That Republican negotiators insisted on shortchanging the people of the District of Columbia. And if I'm wrong about that, it would be a very easy fix in an amendment that could be offered by the majority leader, and I'm sure accepted unanimously. Except for the fact that this actually was a point that was negotiated. Now, Madam President, I'm not going to hold up a $2 trillion emergency rescue package that is urgently needed by the country for this, but I think it's shameful. I think it's shameful that in a $2 trillion emergency rescue package, we would shortchange the people right here in the nation's capital. People who we see coming into work every day. Many of the federal employees who work day in and day out for the federal government. Many of them live here, many of them live in surrounding states, many of them live all over the country. But for the people who live here, to shortchange them and to do it intentionally is really outrageous. And so here we are coming together, and that's the right thing to do. As I said, this bill has many, many flaws and many, many problems. I certainly wouldn't have written it this way, and I would never have done wrong by the people of the District of Columbia the way this was intentionally done, apparently, in this bill. But overall, we need this bill for the country. We need it because we have a national emergency, both on the health care front and the economic front. So I hope going away from here as we come together, and I hope we'll do the right thing with a large vote, I hope there'll be some senators, whoever were part of negotiating that deal, who said, no, we're going to shortchange the people of our nation's capital. I hope they will feel a little bit ashamed. And I think all those people who didn't want to change this provision, which is easy to change just like that, should feel ashamed. This is our nation's capital. The people who live and work here deserve to be treated with respect. There's no United States senator who represents the people of the District of Columbia. Some of us who live in the surrounding areas work hard to do so. I just wish senators from the rest of the country, and especially in this case, apparently our Republican colleagues, would show a little respect for the people who live in the capital of this great country. And I yield.
One.
Senator, thank you so much for joining us. Senator Van Hollen from Maryland is with us. Thank you also for the words in the Senate and your leadership on statehood. Let me start with, you wrote a letter to the President of the Senate and Senate leadership, signed by 25 other senators, asking that this be fixed. Tell us about that effort to get those 25 signers. And then most importantly, what is it we can do to help make sure that this ends up in the next bill?
Well, Bo, thank you for bringing us together this evening, and for all your leadership and the leadership of people on this call in the fight for equality. I was really mad at night that we passed the CARES bill, and I'm still just as angry today. And we need to correct this wrong. We need to reverse this injustice, and we need to put pressure on Republicans and call upon them to do the right thing. And this time around, The bill will start, I believe, in the House of Representatives as opposed to the United States Senate. I spoke to Speaker Pelosi the day after this happened. I know Representative Eleanor Holmes Norton did so as well. In fact, it was Representative Eleanor Holmes Norton that called me the night the bill was on the floor of the Senate saying, can you check this out? I hear they might have screwed the District of Columbia. And I said, I'll go check it out. And sure enough, that was in there. And you heard my comments. I thought this must be some kind of mistake. But the reality is we have a chance to reverse this injustice both retrospectively and make sure that the next bill, when we provide assistance to state and local governments, treats the District of Columbia and the people in the district fairly going forward. So we need to deal with both fixing the wrong and making sure we get it right going forward. Now, that's going to require solidarity from the start in this round, and I'm confident that Speaker Pelosi, Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton, and others will make sure that that is in the House bill, and then we need to make sure we keep it in the Senate bill that goes to the White House.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I think that's important. As much as you and Senator Cardin of Maryland and the Senators Kaine and Warner from Virginia advocate for DC and advocate for equality for the district, how much of this is really just the fact that we don't have a senator of our own? Would this have happened?
Well, it's a combination of things. Look, if the District of Columbia was made a state, this would not have happened. And that is why, I've been fighting for DC statehood since the very beginning. And we just need to work even harder. We've made great progress, and this movement has made great progress. In fact, the reality that this got to, that Trump talked about it today.
That's right.
Just makes it all the more important that we redouble our efforts, because his comments today revealed that the Republican position is nothing about protecting the democracy. It's nothing about protecting justice. It's all about raw political power and trying to keep the people of the District of Columbia down so Republicans can be up in the United States Senate. So this just means we got to work harder. Obviously, we got to win the United States Senate. We got to keep the majority in the House. We got to win the White House. I mean, that is the way forward. But in the immediate term, right now, in terms of the next round of relief, we need to make sure we get this into the House bill, and this effort this time will begin in the House, and then we need to make sure we keep it in the United States Senate.
Terrific. I got just one more question. We're actually working with some of our partner organizations on some of these questions. So from the organization Stand Up America, Christina Harvey, the managing director, has asked, assuming Democrats narrowly take control of the Senate next year, what do you think it takes to pass DC statehood and to ensure it goes through the Senate?
So I like the assumption behind that question. We're all going to have to work really hard to make that assumption a reality. And then, look, we're going to have to make a lot of tough decisions in the next United States Senate, assuming Democrats are in majority. We'll have to evaluate all sorts of things, including the filibuster rule. That's obviously something that Democrats are going to have to take a hard look at. There have been important protections for many progressive values with the filibuster rule, but it's very possible we conclude that we're giving up more than we get in terms of moving our country's agenda forward with the filibuster rule in place. And so we all need to be part of that conversation going forward. Again, this is a conversation I hope we can have where the decision will actually make a difference in the outcome. That's why these elections in November are so important, because that's the route toward getting the District of Columbia the full voting member in the House, plus 2 United States senators, and we need that fight. And I want to also salute the mayor. We've been in regular communication. I will say, as recently as this afternoon, I've been on the phone with people in the White House trying to push them on this issue, along with others, but definitely raise this particular issue So we have to keep the pressure on. This is a hot spot, as you said earlier, and we need to make sure we do the right thing.
Senator, I appreciate you so much joining us. And I thank you for your time, your efforts, your fight in the Senate. I look forward to working together, and we will see you again soon. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
We're going to switch gears just a little bit. It is an honor right now to have our next speaker with us tonight. Vanita Gupta has dedicated her entire career to civil rights work and fighting injustice. She's worked at renowned organizations, including the NAACP Legal Defense and Education Fund, the ACLU, and the Department of Justice, where she oversaw some of President Obama's most significant policing and voting rights reforms. She's now the first woman to lead the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, the nation's oldest and largest civil rights coalition, with over 200 national organizations. DC Vote is proud to be one of those members. There is so much I could say about the work of the Leadership Conference, but I decided to steal a quote from Vanita herself, from one of her many interviews where she describes the work that Leadership Conference does. We are fighting like hell to protect vulnerable communities and to make sure that we are a country as good as our ideals. Vanita, welcome so much, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much, Bo. Hold on one second.
Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Well, good evening. I think I'm hearing an echo. 1 second. Sorry.
No worries.
Okay, I'm Vanita Gupta, President and CEO of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. As Bo mentioned, it's a coalition of more than 220 national organizations working to build an America as good as its ideals. I want to thank Bo and DC Vote, one of our longtime coalition members, for hosting this important town hall to discuss equality in DC statehood. I'm also really grateful for the many efforts of lawmakers to push for equal representation. And thank you to Congresswoman Holmes Norton for her decades of advocacy for DC statehood, and to our neighbors in Maryland, Senator Van Hollen and Representative Raskin, for their unwavering efforts to recognize DC statehood. Our nation right now is in a state of emergency, and so too is our democracy. And we all saw what happened in Wisconsin with voters forced to choose between their safety and their right to vote. We cannot allow that travesty to happen again. With under 6 months until the general election, states have no time to spare in preparing for November amid this pandemic. But as we drive this all hands on deck effort to ensure safe, fair, and accessible elections, for DC residents, one thing remains painfully clear. The right to vote is meaningless if you can't elect people into office who will advocate for the needs of their constituents, who will advocate for you. And residents of the District of Columbia, who are predominantly people of color, pay more taxes per capita than any state in the nation, and yet lack U.S. senators and a full voting member of the U.S. House of Representatives. DC has more than 700,000 residents. It's a population larger than those of Vermont and Wyoming, but it's denied full political representation in our legislative branch of government. It is time to end this second-class citizenship, and DC residents should have never been excluded from the CARES Act. That was unconscionable. It was shameful. So from a broader civil and human rights perspective, the continued disenfranchisement of DC residents before Congress continues to stand out as one of the most blatant violations of that important civil right that Americans have, the right to vote. When it comes to our nation, the rule is really simple. If you don't vote, you don't count. And that is true both at the ballot box and in the halls of Congress. Without the right to vote, without the ability to hold our leaders accountable, all of our other rights are illusory. And there's little question that having elected representation would have ensured that DC residents were included in the CARES package. But that's why DC statehood is so important. That's why this conversation is so important, even and perhaps especially as we plan for the future amid COVID-19. The Leadership Conference has been proud to fight along DC Vote to give every Washington resident the rights they deserve. And we are proud to continue that fight. As my predecessor, Wade Henderson, noted while testifying before the Senate in 2014, until DC residents have a vote in Congress, they will not be better off than African Americans in the South were prior to August 6, 1965, when President Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act into law. And until then, the efforts of the civil rights movement will remain incomplete. So now is the time for us to unite across our differences and reimagine a democracy that we all want to live in. The future is what we're going to create together. And as this pandemic disrupts our daily lives, Congress should seize the opportunity to help us come out on the other side of this, a more equitable and just society. That must include addressing DC statehood. Democracy begins at home, and we urge Congress to start right here and right now. Thank you.
Vanita, thank you so much. I want to just do a couple of questions. Again, we wanted to bring in some of our partner organizations on these. Josh Birch from Neighbors United for DC Statehood, one of our local organizations, had a question actually a little bit about the Leadership Conference itself. You guys, the Leadership Conference offers a scorecard on votes taken by members each Congress. And since the current Senate Majority Leader is, we'll say, hostile at best to pro-democracy reforms like DC Statehood, there won't be votes in the Senate on most of those bills. Would the Leadership Conference consider scoring co-sponsorship instead of just votes? And would you include the DC Statehood bill in that scorecard?
So the Leadership Conference doesn't usually score co-sponsorships because we work on so many bills, but we absolutely would be prepared to score a vote in the House. And that's how part of how we hold our elected officials accountable.
I can see Congresswoman Norton waiting in the wings here, and so I know she heard that Leadership Conference is going to score the House vote. That's fantastic. We're going to talk to her in just a second. Vanita, again, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for all the work that you do and for fully including DC Vote and the statehood movement in the priorities of the Leadership Conference. It's so important to us. Have a great rest of your week, and let us know how we can be helpful on the civil rights front.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
You bet. We're now going to hear from our fierce and effective delegate in the House of Representatives. I got to say that because that's the legal term. Because we're not a state, we don't have a voting representative in Congress, but we call her Congresswoman. This is Congresswoman Norton was active in the civil rights movement. She was an early advocate for women's rights and is one of the most senior and respected members of the House of Representatives. Welcome, Congresswoman Norton, and thank you so much for being with us.
Bo, I can't thank you and DC Vote enough for what you're doing tonight, because what you're doing tonight tells the world and tells all who are listening that hearing from me does not mean that there are not thousands of more people who are for statehood for the District of Columbia. I thank you for the 102 organizations that you have gathered to support DC statehood, and I'm so appreciative of all those who are participating in this virtual town hall. It's very good to know that we have many allies, and so I'm going to try to say what has not been said here. When we consider where we are today, people may be asking, is there any chance we're going to get DC statehood? Well, the chances are much better than I think most people understand. Not only do we have control of the House, but we have the highest leaders, Nancy Pelosi and Steny Hoyer, who's also written an op-ed for the Washington Post, working for us every day. The House of Representatives did something important, just as the Democrats in the House of Representatives did something very important, just as we captured the House. It put forward a bill called H.R. 1. Now, H.R. 1 had dozens of priorities related to democracy that Democrats sought. Among those was DC statehood. So there's already been a vote in favor of DC statehood. And H.R. 1, we got every member of the House to vote for DC statehood. And H.R. 1 stated findings much more elaborate than our DC statehood bill. Findings for DC statehood. So we've already had that vote. We now have more than enough co-sponsors this year to pass our bill, the DC Statehood bill, in the House. And as I speak, every Democratic senator has co-sponsored our bill. When you look at the lineup for the Democrats and versus Republicans in the Senate, the Democrats have a very good chance of capturing the Senate. So I'm very hopeful about the Senate itself because Democrats could flip the Senate even as we have flipped the House. Finally, let me tell you what this means in practical terms to us. And the best way to point that out is to look at the COVID-19 bill and why statehood would matter given this pandemic. As I speak, I'm having to make fights I would never have to make otherwise. Here's a fight that Democrats don't even think they have to make, and that is last night, one of my very good friends, the head of our appropriation bill, Nita Lowey, announced funding for states, counties, and cities. We are having to work to make sure DC gets that money. Nita Lowey did the right thing because often the state gets the money and the county and the city does not. So right now I'm trying to make sure that DC gets that entire money because we are a city state. Otherwise, we could end up being cheated again. Now, we were cheated, of course, when we did not get 1.25 billion in the CARES Act. And that meant that we were robbed of $755 million. Well, how did that happen? We always get state funding. That's the one thing we always get. That happened because the Republicans in the Senate were leaders of that bill, and they simply pitched us in with the territories. We are not a territory. The territories do not pay federal taxes, but being pitched in with them meant that Puerto Rico got most of the money and the district was left $755 million short. Finally, let me say, and I ask everybody to listen to this, because this is something you also may not know about, and that is that the district is striving to participate in what is called the Federal Reserve's Municipal Liability Facility. And that is another anomaly because it was established to support borrowing by the states, cities, and counties. The facility rules allow DC to participate, but the DC Home Rule Act would have to be changed for this purpose. And we have submitted language so that in case we need this, we do not know yet that we will need it, but it gives the district express authority to get funds from the Federal Reserve's municipal facility. Those are some practical reasons, quite apart from democracy that we hear about every day.
Right.
Why I'm waiting for DC's statehood vote.
Yeah, the myriad of ways that we're impacted by our lack of statehood, you don't even know them all until they happen to us, it feels like sometimes. I want to, we talked a little bit about the funding fix. We've got some big allies we've heard from in the House. Both Leader Hoyer and Speaker Pelosi have made comments about the fix of revenue and making sure that DC is treated like a state in the next CARES Act. How do you feel about our prospects of getting that funding back for the district's residents?
Well, we've already had one test, not a test about states, but in the last bill, which was not a CARES Act bill, but the last bill we passed, the DC gets full funding. So I do think that we have a decent chance because we've got so much support in the House and the Senate, and because so many people have spoken out.
Yeah, that's the perfect segue to my next question. We've been doing questions from our partner organizations as well. Stand Up for Democracy in DC, Free DC, sent a question via Facebook. What can DC residents do? What can DC residents do, folks that live here, to ensure there's a vote on the Hill this session still for HR 51? How do we make sure that that bill, even though we're dealing with the COVID-19 times that we're dealing with, how do we get that bill through the floor?
I certainly appreciate the work of Stand Up for Democracy, and I appreciate that question, because with everybody focused on coronavirus, we could forget about the fact that there could be, and we will get it, a vote for DC statehood. So I think what Stand Up for Democracy and those on this call can do is to every week put something out that says, make sure there is a vote for DC statehood this session. We have the votes to pass. If we can pass that message out and put that message out every week, then people will know that there's more on our minds than
right.
coronavirus, and that as important as that is, this too must happen.
Terrific. Congresswoman, thank you so much for being with us, for your leadership, for your fight on the Hill. I am sure that we will be in contact even more, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Washington, D.C. isn't just a city. The district takes on the functions of a city, a state, and a county all at once. However, the leader of our district is referred to as mayor. For the last 5 years, Mayor Muriel Bowser has served as our mayor. As a fifth-generation Washingtonian, a former member of the district council, and a parent of a toddler, Mayor Bowser brings her deep understanding of the district from a variety of perspectives. And those perspectives really inform the present challenges that we face. Mayor Bowser, it is great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. How's your evening?
Thanks, Bo. I hope that you can hear me.
I can hear you just
good.
fine, and we can see you good too. So we're all set on the tech front.
All right.
We've heard often, and Congresswoman Norton just mentioned it, the more than $700 million that DC was shortchanged in the CARES Act. One question that we haven't heard a lot of answers to is, what would that mean for the residents of DC? Specifically, where would that money, what can we do that we can't do right now because we don't have that funding?
Well, right now, Bo, the guidance around how CARES can be used is evolving. When it was first announced, it was all for COVID response. Then the guidance changed to say that it could be used for second-degree COVID response. For example, if we need to do more things to help open up our schools, then we could charge it to that account. It's evolved even more now to say that we can use it to support first responders in our medical response, things that we normally would have used our local funds to do. So I think it's evolving to the point where those where we can support activities, previously budgeted activities, that will help us with our revenue loss problem. So it's a very big deal. And I don't know anybody who doesn't think $750 million can't be used to make the city's response, direct response to COVID more robust, and certainly our comeback more robust.
Right. We know that DC has got a little bit of heat going on with our COVID-19 cases, so that money would absolutely help with those responses. What is the effort? We've heard from Senator Van Hollen, we've heard from Congresswoman Norton. From the district's perspective, what is the effort to secure that funding, working with the allies in Congress to make sure that the second CARES Act that goes through, we've got that taken care of?
We certainly follow our Congresswoman's lead. When I think we were all shocked and outraged by this categorization of DC as a territory, which we are not, of course. And we frankly have been talking to everybody about our need to secure this $750 million. Over the last several weeks, we have argued that this could be a technical fix that did not have to be entangled in the state-city fight that's going on now. We're going to be a part of that fight too, but we think that the fix of the territory and the additional appropriation could be made on any vehicle.
Got it. Switching gears just a little bit, because we got thrown a little bit of a right hook or left curve this afternoon when President Trump interview on Statehood. Strongest words we've ever heard from the president. What's your take on that? I know that you've had a couple of meetings with him at different times, but we've never sort of heard that language from him before.
We've never heard it, and I think it just puts in a very clear light that we're in a very political time. And his focus is on his reelection, and I don't think it was his posture to say that states could go bankrupt and blue states don't matter. But I think he kind of got pulled into this really nasty partisanship that's going on, and we are used to being kind of a part of fights that don't have anything to do with us, and we just get thrown in for good measure. But I think it's also reflective of the good work that we've been doing, quite frankly. We have made the case for statehood. We've advanced it farther than it's ever been advanced, with building on grassroots effort that are 30 years old. We had a very, I think, effective hearing in the House. And the House has demonstrated that it's ready to take a vote. So we put a lot of heat on the Republicans, highlighting the partisan nature of our fight. It's a matter for the presidential election, so it's going to come up. So this is an argument that we're ready to have.
I know we're ready to have it as well. We were a little hot this afternoon when we heard it, but it's also sort of a fire in the belly. What can DC residents do, both as we're dealing with the rest of COVID-19, but really on moving forward in the statehood fight, in the efforts to convince folks about our unfair treatment? What is the most important things for us in the district to do?
Well, I think that we continue to talk to our allies, and we can't forget about Republicans who are quietly supporting us. They see the problem with treating the district as a territory and shortchanging the district. Many of them live here a good portion of their time. Their staffs live here, and they can see that the not providing the funds that will be used for a pandemic response affecting the nation's capital is really, really quite ludicrous. So we continue to make sure that we are finding our allies in the Senate and giving them any and all information that they need to make sure this is part of the next package. And we continue to show our appreciation to the Speaker of the House, who has just been awesome. Called her on a Sunday. She spent a long time talking to me, and I was very pleased that she's on our issue. We know we get reports back from the calls that she has with the caucus, and she always says that it's her first priority. So continuing to give her that information, I think, is good. The partnership that we have with our friends in Maryland and Virginia, I think, is also important. And supporting the DMV delegation to push hard, I think is going to be very important as well.
Yeah, it seems that the alignment between you and Governor Northam and Governor Hogan has been pretty tight in the response to COVID, and hopefully that'll continue to carry on as we switch to statehood, and we'll see some cross-aisle support perhaps. So thank you so much for your time and for being with us and for the update. Best to your family, and we will talk to you soon.
Thank you, Bo.
Thanks. Our next guest, I'm excited to welcome someone who has become a friend of mine. Virginia Kase is the CEO of the League of Women Voters of the United States. She comes to us the League of Women Voters is a huge organization with more than 700 local leagues around the country. She is focused on building power to advocate for voting rights and democracy reform. We can both of us tell you about the various locations of Pete's Coffee around town, but that's a story for a different day. Prior to joining the League in 2018, Virginia served as the COO of Kase, an organization at the forefront of the immigrants' rights movement, representing nearly 100,000 members. Thank you so much for being with us. The League has been a huge partner in our quest to become the 51st state. And this year, you all are celebrating your 100th year anniversary. I think you may have been pushing for statehood almost as long. So welcome, my friend, Virginia. Thank you. Why has League of Women Voters been a statehood, or has seen statehood as such an important issue for so long?
Well, hi, Bo, for having me. And yes, we can tell everybody all the Pete's locations throughout DC. We know that funny story we'll get into in another time. But, I think for the League, it's just continues to be this idea that democracy should be for everybody and that we shouldn't have second-class citizens in our own country, especially, when you look at the fact that, DC was disenfranchised. It's not as though, DC was here from the beginning, so to speak, as the nation's capital. That came later on. And so people, ever since it became the nation's capital, people have been disenfranchised. And we just don't see that the fairness and equal representation and not having equal representation for everybody. And so it's not just a DC issue, it's an American issue. And I think that's one of the things that we uphold as a value in our country is that every person in this country has the right to have fair representation. And unfortunately, DC just doesn't.
When you, unlike most of the folks that we've talked to this evening, you're actually out across the country and talking with different members in different leagues. What's the reaction that you get when you start telling them about what it means to be a DC resident, what it means to not have representation in the House? What do they say?
Interesting thing is that so many people aren't even aware that that's the case. It's almost shocking to me that people don't realize that people in DC don't have the same voting rights as everybody else and don't have representation the way that everybody else does. And there's always this immediate, well, why not? That's the first question that people ask. And the League, like you said, we have more than 760 leagues throughout the country. We're in all 50 states in every congressional district. And so we've made it a priority that when we go out there and we talk to folks, we're bringing up the importance of DC statehood. And it's just because if nothing else, it's about educating other people throughout the country on this fight and the importance for DC residents. And again, it's always shocking that people have no idea. And then they are even more shocked when they find out that not only does DC not have representation, but that it has more residents than some states. In some states,
right.
Yeah, people are shocked by it. It's hard for people to believe that that could even be possible in this day and age.
Have you all been able to communicate with members at all about sort of the shortchanging in CARES, or are you still sort of having the statehood conversations first on an education level?
We have been having those conversations, and I know Vanita was on earlier, a good friend and partner in this fight as well. And so we have been supportive along with our coalition, and we have written many letters. We have done outreach to representatives in Congress, just letting them know that DC should have the same resources that any other state does. And it's not a territory, and that just the shortchanging of people is just unacceptable.
Yeah, I know that the League of Women Voters National, as well as the DC chapter, signed on to the letter that we sent up. I think we ended up at 120 some odd organizations supporting, and you guys were one of the first ones to join up in that effort. So we appreciate it so much. As we move forward, we're going to see a lot of other voting and democracy reforms coming our way. We saw DC statehood included in HR 1, that omnibus democracy reform bill that the House passed, that one caucus of the House passed unanimously earlier this year. How does League of Women Voters prioritize the inclusion of DC statehood in the democracy reforms that you guys are talking about?
Will remain a priority for us as an organization. Again, seeing people disenfranchised within our own country, our fellow citizens, it's just absolutely not acceptable, especially in this day and age where, you know, we talk about the importance of our democracy, but it can't mean at the expense of some. And so that will continue to be something that we will lobby and push for and fight for and continue to educate our fellow citizens. Like I said, we're throughout the country. And so in California, you know, we had a big event last year, and that was one of our priority topics because we have to get the information out to everybody else. So many people don't know. It's like if we're just having the conversation amongst ourselves and it's just us in DC
Right.
who are having the conversation, we're never going to be able to move the work. So we need to have people behind the movement. And that means having people in every single state who are talking to their representatives and reinforcing this is a priority for all of us.
I really appreciate it. I'm going to plug again an action step right above my head somewhere on one side or the other is our website. It's showupfordc.com. It's the number 4 /cheated, showupfordc.com/cheated, where folks from your organization, our organization, all across the country can take action and let their elected officials know. Thank you so much for being with us. Stay safe. Your family is safe as well. I look forward to getting together in person when we can do that again.
Of course, anytime. You all stay safe and just know that LWV is a partner. We've been here. We're going to continue to be here, and you know, stay safe. And we'll be talking again soon. The fight continues.
We will see. I'm going to steal the line from the Nationals, and at some point we're going to finish this fight. So thank you so much, Virginia. I'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Take care. Bye-bye.
All right. Our next guest has been a force to reckon with in Maryland for decades. As a professor, a constitutional law scholar, a community advocate, a member of the Maryland legislature, an author whose paper led to the creation of DC Vote at some level, and now as a member of Congress for the 8th District of Maryland, Congressman Jamie Raskin. You have been a leader for equality for DC for so long. It's great to see you. Thank you for joining us. Some opponents of equality for DC, well, today it changed a little bit, but some opponents of equality for DC says that we have to amend the Constitution in order for DC to become a state. I know it's dangerous to ask a constitutional lawyer to give a short answer to a question, but what is the wrap on constitutionality on DC statehood? And welcome to our conversation this evening.
Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be with all my friends at DC Vote. Look, since the original 13 colonies and the original 13 states, 37 states have been admitted to the Union, and all of them have been admitted by acts of Congress. None of them has been admitted by way of a constitutional amendment, despite many claims along the way that, oh, well, if you're going to do West Virginia from Virginia, you need a constitutional amendment, or if you're going to admit Texas, which is its own republic, you need a constitutional amendment, or if you're going to admit Hawaii and Alaska, which are not contiguous, you need a constitutional amendment. And all of that has been dismissed, of course, and it's wrong because Article 4 gives Congress the exclusive plenary power to admit states, and that's how DC wants to come in. Look, all those constitutional arguments are phony, Bo, as you know, and I'm glad that President Trump came out and told the truth about what's behind Republican opposition to DC statehood. It's purely partisan, it's nakedly political, and that is a totally unconstitutional and un-American sentiment, because in America, we don't deprive people of the right to vote based on how you expect they will vote. That's just discrimination.
I thought it was about parking, right? We heard a lot about parking during the House hearings. That it was about parking spots, and it was about.
It's more about the Constitution, but it's much less about parking than it is about what Donald Trump said it was. I mean, the great thing about having somebody of his level of intelligence in the White House is that he will tell you exactly what's on his mind. And he said that means 2 more senators, and then he, of course, being mathematically challenged, said it would be 4 or 5 representatives as well. I think it was most 2.
I think it was our council member Charles Allen. I saw a tweet from him just after that saying that if that was our negotiating point, we could just start to give back Congress people because we weren't going to get 4 anyway. So if we could settle on 2 senators and a House member, it sounds like a good deal, and maybe he'll go for it. I want to bring in one of our partner organizations to ask a question. People for the American Way, Diallo Brooks, who is the Senior Director of Outreach and Public Engagement sent a question. DC statehood is often portrayed just as a local issue. And in what ways is the debate about DC becoming the 51st state a national issue? And how do we make it relevant to national audiences?
Well, I mean, every state's admission is both local and it's national. It's of the most intense and urgent and pressing importance to the people locally. People in DC know that because they've just been cheated out of $750 million in a life and death pandemic crisis that the government needs to serve the people. Okay. But it's a matter of national politics too, because the framers clearly thought that the way that you deal with tyranny in America is you continually extend the boundaries of democracy. And so you want everybody included and everybody participating, and we'd be in a much better condition as a national democracy today if DC were represented in the Senate and the House with voting representatives. I mean, we would all be much better off if we had people from DC voting on judges, voting on Supreme Court justices, voting on war and peace, voting on the federal budget, voting on the distribution of disaster aid, and contributing ideas from the people of Washington. So it's national and it's local.
And how do you, it's funny that we asked that question because the person who's coming up next is our friend Tamyra from Iowans for DC Statehood. So she's going to talk a little bit about how we resonate with nationals. But when I know that your district is close to the District of Columbia. How do people in your district react when you start talking about statehood when they don't live here, when they can't see a direct one-on-one benefit?
Well, I represent people in Montgomery County, in Frederick County, and Carroll County. I represent perhaps the bluest county or one of the 2 or 3 bluest counties in Maryland. That's Montgomery. I represent the reddest county in Maryland, which is Carroll County, and I represent a swing county, Frederick. But everywhere I go, people believe in political equality, and they don't think that we are improved as a society or we even benefit as Marylanders by trampling on the voting rights and the equality of people in DC. On the contrary, our whole region is going to be much stronger when we have 2 extra senators coming from the new state and the representatives in the House from the new state working with us for all of the aid that we need. You know, when DC got cheated out of $750 million for coronavirus response, that affects my constituents too. So, you know, nearly half of the people who are in hospitals in DC come from Maryland or Virginia. And a lot of them are, you know, coming from nearby places in my district in Montgomery County.
How do we make sure that this gets fixed? How can people who are listening tonight or watching tonight from wherever they're in, how can they get involved and actually make an impact in Congress? Do phone calls work? Do emails work? What's the best way to let their members of Congress know what to treat DC equally?
I mean, all of that stuff. I think we've got to elevate right now the outrageous geographical discrimination that's taking place against DC. And we've got to demand that the money be made whole and that DC be treated as if it were a state for all programmatic financial purposes going forward. And I hope we have legislation on that so this doesn't happen again, you know, even before statehood. But, you know, I mean, it's kind of tough. I mean, people in DC on one hand are advantaged by virtue of being, you know, right near the seat of government, right near the Capitol. So people can generally be available to protest. On the other hand, we're in the middle of this terrible pandemic crisis with social distancing, but maybe there's some kind of creative form of, you know, socially distanced protest where everybody can go out on their porch at the same time to hold a flashlight or light a candle or something for the fair treatment of DC, and ask people in other places to do the same thing, because you definitely need to dramatize what's going on here. I mean, it's a life and death crisis, and the discrimination is just outrageous.
Congressman Raskin, I really appreciate your time, and thank you so much for being here and for being such an advocate for DC and the strength and believing in the strength of our democracy. Have a great night, stay safe, and we will talk to you soon.
Thank you so much. All best to all my friends out there.
So now it's time for each of us to sort of make our action plans. You've heard from some of the leadership of the movement and of the organizations and of our elected officials. And we need to get the funds that we deserve to fight the impact of this horrible virus. We heard from the mayor directly about what that money can do and how it can help us in our coronavirus response. All of us must call out this injustice, and we have to work to get more people across the country to join this fight. And one such person from across the country who has joined this fight is Tamyra Harrison from Iowa. She's going to serve as our final speaker tonight, and I'm hoping that she can inspire you with some of the work that she has done to reach out to friends and family and those you know across the country. You may not found your own organization like Tamyra did, but if you can even just put together the work that's 1/100th of the effort that she's put forth, we will be so much better off in this effort. Tamyra, welcome. You got mad, you heard about the injustice, and you founded an organization. And when you've been to DC, like what sparked that, and how do we replicate that, and how do we get more people doing that energy?
Hey, Bo, first of all, thank you for having me. It's really good to see you. I in 2015, I was the executive director for Polk County Democrats here in Iowa. That happens to be the Des Moines and capital area of the state. And through a mutual friend, met DC Senator Paul Strauss and was asked to do an event for him to kind of educate people here on DC statehood. And I said, sure, absolutely. You know, we love to hear new things and hear from new people. And so he came, we did an event, and I was dumbfounded from how little I understood. And this goes back to the lady with League of Women Voters, what she was saying, you know, a lot of people really just don't know or understand. And it as I said, dumbfounded me. I had to do something. That's just who I am. And so I got out there and started talking to people and developed this organization and kept track of our supporters and attended different conventions and caucuses and all these different things. And in just this last year, in 2019, put together some key folks, and we formed a 501c3 and took it to the next level. So it's really exciting to see the movement that we've had here and the support we're having for our friends out there in DC.
When you're talking to folks, and what messages work? If somebody's on tonight and they live here in DC or they live somewhere else and they want to influence their friends and family, what are the 2 or 3 quick things they can say that are really going to have an impact on people who don't live in the district?
What I found, most people that we talk to here or from anywhere that don't live in the district, the first question is, why should we care? And my first response is, why shouldn't we? Everybody should care. We're talking about our fellow Americans and people not being treated equally. And this is just something that it should outrage everybody. And usually when you tell people that there's almost as many people, or more people rather, than 2 states, almost as many as several states, that are not represented, that are not sharing the same rights as the rest of us, and explain some of the different ways that affects their daily lives, people are surprised and quickly join us in our movement. And for the most part, you do get people that are adamantly political and unfortunately want to stick with the divisive nature that is kind of embedded into this fight that we're having to get this done.
One thing we talked about with the mayor a little bit was bipartisanship and her relationship with Governor Hogan and some of the other Republicans that she's met with. Obviously, the president went a different direction today on bipartisanship. But you've had luck talking to elected officials from the Republican Party and getting them to be supportive. How did that come about?
Believed from the beginning, and it's why we wanted to form a 501c3, that if this was going to happen in a meaningful and solid way, that we needed to be talking to everybody, not just to Democrats. We needed to be talking to Republicans, independents, people who are not even normally politically engaged, anybody we can. In fact, that's one of the reasons we did the RAGBRAI event here in Iowa, which had almost 30,000 people at times. in
For
each
folks
Ohio
that
town.
For folks that don't know, what's RAGBRAI?
RAGBRAI is the Registers Iowa, where you have bicyclists come in from every state, other countries, all over. Again, there's sometimes 30,000 people riding in one day from one town to the next. Happens over an entire week. We had a booth in every town that week. We talked to people from many different states, from other countries, and it was just amazing the conversations we had. By the time it was over, and we didn't know whether somebody was a Republican or a Democrat or independent or anything when we were talking to them. And we ended up getting signatures from people from 34 different states across the country supporting this, including Republicans and independents. So when you get outside of the political bubble, I think people that aren't so worried about the power struggle between the Democrats and the Republicans, but care more about their fellow Americans and that, you know, we're all in this together. I think it's a lot easier to, or you find people that are willing to support this regardless of political party much more. And in fact, this year we were welcomed to come to, well, first I'd spoke at a Republican area group, which was very pleasant. They were absolutely wonderful and got a couple of supporters at that event. And then I was welcome to come to the Polk County Republican Convention this year, which happened right before everything shut down. So I'm kind of glad we got it in, but it was great. We ended up with 12 people signing our petition. And of those 12 people, 2 Republican elected officials, very prominent, well-known elected officials here, State Senator Brad Zahn and Representative Brian Losey. And I was absolutely thrilled to have them sign on. You know, and one of the things Senator Zahn said when he said, well, you know, they're a little more liberal than I like, but yeah, they should have the same rights as everybody else. And to be able to hear that not every Republican shares this view that we seem to always assume that they have, really motivated and encouraged me even more that we need to be doing more of that. We need to be doing more of getting in front of people from all walks of life.
Fantastic. I know that I've mentioned it a couple of times. We have a toolkit up at showupfordc.com/cheated where people can get materials. You guys have one as well, sort of on your website of some talking points and things. Where can people find out more information about Iowans for DC Statehood?
Well, we have our website is for dcstatehood.com, and that's all spelled out. And you can go on there and see what we're doing. Unfortunately, we're not doing RAGBRAI this year. That has been canceled. That's something we hope to do again next year because it was so successful for us. But we do have a petition we're circling around in hopes of getting our state legislature to pass a resolution supporting DC statehood. And we're hoping to have that done in the next session next year. So, you know, encourage people, if you're in Iowa, absolutely sign that. If you know anybody in Iowa, have them go to our website, sign up. And then they can sign on to our petition as well. We'd love to have as many as we can so that we can present that at the House and Senate here, the State House, all these signatures and say this is why we need to do this, because Iowa stands with our brothers and sisters in DC.
Tamyra, stay safe out there. Thank you so much. We want to get you back out here again at some point. It was great having you for the hearing. It was great having you here for the hearing. We had a blast. So stay safe, keep up the good work. Tell hello to your husband for me, and we will talk to you soon.
Thank you so much, Bo.
You bet. I want to wrap up real quickly. Taxation without representation was wrong in 1776. It's wrong today. More than 700,000 of us live under oversight of Congress, which has no representatives of us. And it is just demonstrated they are willing to put partisan politics over our health in a pandemic. This is discrimination, and it has gone on far too long. Together, when we organize, we can make a difference. If you live outside of DC, call the Senate. Call your senator, 202-224-3121, and tell them that DC should be paid its fair share of COVID aid. If you live in DC or you want to help from anywhere, reach out to everyone that you know locally and across the country and head to the website we've mentioned, and I think it's still above my head, showupfordc.org. That's showupfordc.com. Sorry, showupfordc.com. It's the number 4. facebook.com/cheated for ideas on emails that you can send, tweets you can write, messages to put on your Facebook page, even backgrounds for your next Zoom call. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. Thank you for those of you who have been with us the whole hour. Have a great evening. Please stay safe. Thank you one more time to the People for the American Way, to Stand Up for America, Declaration for American Democracy, the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, the team over at We Act Radio and Act TV who helped put this town hall together. A special note, of course, of gratitude to all of our speakers tonight for taking away time from their schedules to be with us. And finally, a personal thank you from me to the rest of the DC Vote team, both our staff and our board, for everything that you do every day. Stay home if you can. Stay safe, and thank you all from all of us here at DC Vote. Good night.